Photosyntech, and this is another episode of Meet the Grower. Today, I am very excited to welcome Joe, owner of Casa Genetics, and another Alberta local here to the show. Joe, welcome, brother. Definitely stoked to have you here today.
Oh, hey, Matt. Thanks for having me. Stoked to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to be on the show and just chop it up a little bit with you.
Yeah, for sure. And I know we've been talking a little bit back and forth over the last little while here, and really excited to have you here. I don't get too many people that do breeding on the program. I've had a few, but definitely want to talk more about that. Although before we get into that, quick shout out to Mars Hydro, sponsor of the show. Absolutely appreciate you guys, Mars. ILGM as well. They do a bunch for me. And if you want to help out, link down below to the Patreon. Always appreciate the support. That being said, Joe, we are here to talk about you today, brother. And, to get into it, before we really talk about plants and breeding and all that kind of cool stuff, I want to find out a little bit more about you as an individual. Tell me how you got to be where you are now.
Well, basically what started my journey to where I'm at now with Casa is I myself am, I'm a cannabis patient. I've got some neck and spinal issues. I've got some old head injuries, just from past issues and previous jobs. I was in the Army for a couple of years, and unfortunately, while I was in there, I messed up my knees pretty good and my lower back. Actually, still having some lower back issues because of that, and so that kind of actually, if I backtrack a little bit, my journey specifically with cannabis started really out of curiosity. I had a few friends that were doing it, and it kind of made me curious. And then I realized that actually a lot of the people that were picking on me, a lot of my bullies, they all smoked weed. So I very quickly found out, who they were getting it from, and I was like, okay, well, I'll cut them out. So I turned my bullies into my customers.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any bullies anymore. So
funny how that works, eh?
And yeah, so I kind of started there, just selling so I'd stop getting beat up. And at the time I didn't even smoke. And I was like, okay, well, if it's that good that these guys stop beating me up over this, maybe this will work. And I tried smoking it. I was like 15 at the time, and it did wonders for my depression and anxiety, even back then as a kid.
Yeah.
And I've been using it to self-medicate ever since. So going on 20 years, I've been using it for various reasons to just self-medicate. Fast forward to where I'm at now, I can't afford to keep stocked up from dispensaries as much as I very much like to support the local shops,
Yeah.
But once I started kind of doing the numbers, which is more affordable, supporting local or just growing myself local and then trying to support others, the latter was definitely the way to go, and substantially cheaper, obviously, to grow as opposed to continuously buy. And the journey's just kind of taken off from there. So really for myself, it was a way to just, it started kind of from entrepreneurial self-preservation standpoint to just not have people messing with me anymore as a kid. And then I really, really discovered the power of the medicine. I was a kid that came from a very broken home, very, very mixed, abusive environment. So to be able to realize the potency of this plant at a young age, it was absolutely life-altering, life-changing.
Yeah. And
all of a sudden, my mom didn't know why at the time, but I was coming less and less off more and more off my doses of the meds I was on as a kid. She didn't know that at 15 I was sneaking out to the ballpark after hours, the skate park, hanging out with my friends, and doing bong rips and smoking doobies. And even if I was doing that once a week, the medicinal, the residual medicinal effects of that, I was more relaxed. I wasn't getting into stuff at school. My grades were going up. I was more focused in class. And I was just like, hey, there's something into this. And I kept researching it. I started growing a little bit. I think when I was around 17, I tried my first outdoor grow, my first and last for many years, because I did kind of okay, and then someone stole it. So that was very disheartening. And I was like, okay, well, screw it. I tried it. That's it. If that's how it goes. And then I just really didn't bother. It was all around me. I didn't have to buy it much. My friends always had it. A lot of people in my family grow. Most of like my dad's side of the family, they've been growing for generations.
Yeah.
And so it's very much rooted in my family, which I know now as an adult. So it's, I don't know, I guess it's kind of in my blood, really, growing specifically. And breeding's been more of a hobby that's grown into what Casa is now. And it's still a hobby. It's still fun for me. But yeah, it's just kind of been that journey that's evolved, and it keeps evolving from there, man. So
yeah, and your story, Joe, it echoes the same sort of tale that I've had from so many other people that I've had on the show. I mean, we're on, I think this is episode 39 right now, so we've got a whole host of other growers, and so
yes.
many people talk about, I was young, I discovered this wonderful plant, it helped center me as an individual, and it's just been part of my journey ever since. But you have taken this a step further. You've gone beyond just growing, and you are breeding. So how did that journey begin? What made you decide to start putting plants together?
So initially that started out of curiosity.
Yeah.
I had, oh my goodness, the very first cross I did, I ended up with some really nice Mighty Mite seeds and some Master Kush seeds. And I was told they were both femmes, and I'm like, cool, I'm gonna grow this really nice stuff out. I'll have some good stuff to smoke. And the Mighty Mite popped male, and the Master Kush popped female. And I was like, oh, well, what do I do? And that, I don't know, this was a few years ago, I guess 3 years ago, 4 years ago now. Mm. And everybody I talked to was like, oh, it's a male, just burn it, just get rid of it. And I'm like, well, it's kind of a waste. What do I do? So I just stuck them together in a tent, and I let nature do its thing. And it was just such a fun process to sit and just watch the development. And honestly, man, I became obsessed with it. Yeah. Just watching the plant develop, watch the changing, especially during pollination, and then seed development is just a trip to watch. And it just kind of flipped a switch in me. So I got more curious. I started buying more books. I started studying the actual like plant DNA and the actual genetics of cannabis. I started reading as much as I could, while listening to podcasts, watching YouTubers. I then jumped on Instagram and started really watching what other people were doing, really following other breeders. That led to me crossing paths with an American breeder. He and I actually really clicked. We actually started working together once upon a time. That story abruptly ended, let's just say. But to be fair, I definitely learned a lot from him. I think we learned a lot from each other, and the interest just peaked from there. Instagram was really pivotal, and me just meeting a lot of really solid people that were also breeding, growing, a lot of brand reps that I was able to connect with, whose stuff I was smoking from stores. And I was like, hey, like, I really love this. Like, would you mind telling me what's behind it? Because I'm kind of dabbling in breeding, and, no, I don't want to steal your stuff, but I'm just curious, like, what goes into this, because I haven't smoked something of this caliber, of this quality. Yeah. And some people would just ghost me, because they don't want to talk about it. And some people would actually start a conversation and be like, oh, bro, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for asking. Here's what we do, and I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. So then I'd follow them more, and it just kind of spiraled from there. And we're, again, just like everything else, we're still growing.
Right on, right on. Yeah, I've recently myself begun down that path of breeding. Like you mentioned, you discovered you had a male in the space, and it's like, well, I mean, personally, I have a hell of a time ever throwing a plant out, especially if it's healthy. I mean, I want to take this, I want to do something with it. And if I can't use it, I'll just give it away, that sort of thing. So I definitely can see how, I guess, attractive the breeding scenario is, because it just gives you a chance to really start experimenting and seeing what sort of your own I guess addition to the genealogy you can add in there by mashing up a couple different cultivars.
Oh,
Now, in
absolutely. You know, like I've always been into gardening. I've always had a green thumb, and I mean, growing up, cannabis was full paw. You know, like it was very. You didn't talk about it. You know, like no one did it. You know, and um, now that it's legal, like the knowledge is everywhere. Everybody's talking about it. So many people are growing it. You know, and so being able to just, I mean, having the passion that I have for it in like now after prohibition, it's just a beautiful thing, you know, and specifically, you know, knowing what I've learned now and as you said, watching it through those phases, it's just beautiful. I mean, realistically, like we're you know, whether you're growing or breeding, you're creating life, you know,
yeah.
and you're watching life grow. And that's just beautiful right there, you know?
Yeah. Oh, so much so. It's just man. I mean, gardening, like you say, it's so wonderful. Tell me then about your grow space, how it's evolved over time. And I know that recently you've run into some issues with having to move, and I mean all that sort of thing
Yeah,
involved. So I mean, despite the fact we live in a legal market, there's still, I guess, problems that can come up. Talk about that.
absolutely. Absolutely. So my very first grow space was um, was a dresser.
Yeah.
My very first grow space was a dresser that my daughters had sponge painted for me back in the day. And so I pulled all the drawers out and I took a bunch of tinfoil. I crinkled it up by hand so I got the reflective angles, whatever, stretched it out, and I wrapped the inside of that dresser. And I actually just hung up this little T5 bar light, and I popped some Tangerine Dream Femme. I grew a wicked tangy in that in that thing. I don't know how. I just a plastic 2-gallon bucket that I got for free from IGA. Some seeds I bought from True North Seed Bank that were on special, you know, and
Yep.
grew a beautiful plant. And then I was just hooked. So from there, that evolved into I stripped down a cold storage room, and I bought actually the 4x4 that's beside me right now that I now use more for germination and early veg. I bought a 4x4 Vival Sun tent, and I set that up in the cold storage room. I moved into that. Then I quickly realized that I was kind of onto something. I got this tent dialed in. I wanted more. I wanted to grow more.
Yeah.
I then bought 4x8, and I moved the 4x8 I put the 4x8 and the 4x4 out in my garage. Reinsulated my whole garage to make that work, and that winter was the most expensive heat bill I've ever had just to keep that shop heated. So I ran that setup. I mean, I still run a lot of that setup, but fast forward, I was able to move into a grow room. Essentially, my family and I, we were able to start doing a rent to own on an acreage, a beautiful acreage, exactly what we wanted. Gorgeous 10-acre piece of land with multiple outbuildings. We had a beautiful, massive dugout that was naturally fed, so never any supply of water. And we were happy, man. It was really, really good. I was about to open a different business on the property as well. But out there was a massive cold storage space and kind of a rec room. So I took the one wall, moved the wall out 8 feet. That gave me a whole room to just germ and veg in. And then I moved everything out into the flower room. And I had I think it was roughly 25 feet by 14 or 15 foot grow room.
Okay.
Or flower room. Yeah, it was a beautiful space. I wrapped the entire room with Mylar, and I hung all my lights. I wrapped the ceiling and everything. Had a beautiful space. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, things can be going great. You can have lots, and there can be unexpected circumstances, let's say, even while living here in Canada, where we're legal coast to coast. And this was one of those things. And unfortunately, I had somebody on my team at the time who was really bringing a lot of negativity toward what we were doing, to the extent that a lot of the collaborators that I'm working with now were backing off. And they were like, look, man, this guy's really bringing some, we just don't want to work with you if you're working with him. Like, it was basically at that point. And I was like, you know what, let me look into this, so maybe in how I am, I like to weigh out both sides of the story, so I reached out to the guy and I was like, hey, I've been backing you up for month after month, but this is getting ridiculous. What do we do here? And this guy was basically pissing off a lot of people, stepping on a lot of people's toes, getting stuff for free, seeds for free, gear for free, sponsorships for free, which is fine, but not doing shout outs, not saying thank you, just basically, giving a F you and then disappearing, and then my name was being used in the process. So anyways, I had the conversation that I felt his behavior wasn't a good look for what I was trying to build with Casa Genetics. So I removed him from the team. I was like, I wish you nothing but the best, but you're burning a lot of bridges and I don't see you being helpful to anybody. So, you got my love and respect, but that's it, man.
It's time to part ways,
yeah. Unfortunately, I moved on and he didn't. He tracked down the owners of the property, sent them pictures of all my grows, sent them a whole bunch of stuff of my Instagram content and my Facebook content. They turned around and they brought they arranged to do an inspection with us under the pretenses of coming to inspect for remaining repairs. I'm like, okay, cool. We got some stuff that's remaining. Yeah. It's outstanding. Awesome. They're on the ball. Finally, we appreciate that. Absolutely. Come on out. They then showed up with this guy who was clearly there to just throw his weight around and be an instigator. His family is known locally as a very, very large growing family. And he was just there to stir the pot, essentially. And they came, they're looking around the property and, my spotty sense was up right away. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Something's off here. And I mean, the second that you walk into the house, there was never any smell. My fans were all working, everything, doing what they would. You come downstairs, still everything. Like before you walk into my grow room, you could see my big ACMPR, my license is on the wall. It's all legit, whatever. And so they stopped, they read that, and they're like, huh. And then they come in, I'm sitting there and I'm filling up seed packs to ship out to my team. And I'm like, oh yeah, how are you guys doing? And this I guess you don't want the cold storage room anymore. And I'm like, no, I don't need it. I don't do any jarring,
Yeah.
And so anyways, long story short, this guy walks up to my tent, opens my tent, walks right into my big tent, and my fresh harvest is dry in there. And he's like, huh, nice setup you got here. I'm like, yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Not even 2 hours later, we got a phone call and we were given 24 hours to get out. I offered to destroy everything I had left. And he said, well, what happens if you need it in a few weeks? I said, then I guess I'll go to the legal dispensary and I'll buy the plant that I'm legally prescribed by my doctor to use in a legal country, And he's like, no, it's not good enough. So I was like, hang on a second. I said, I know you're driving up down the road. I said, watch for the flames. He's like, excuse me? I'm like, I got your attention, don't I? So watch for the flames. I took every last plant and I threw it in the bonfire. I said, there's my last crop. I said, there's all my breeding line. I said, there's all my projects. I said, I will never grow anything on this property again. Please don't evict my family and I. And he said, I don't even want you smoking on the property. And I'm like, you just crossed the line. I said, because that's my right. And I said, so obviously we're not on the same page. And he said, no. I said, I just ruined my livelihood to save this house. And he said, no. You know, so even in a country where we're legal coast to coast, hate can be a very real thing, and misunderstanding can be a very real thing, and difference of views can be a very real thing. Later, I was able to talk to this guy that we were originally renting from. Yeah. We had backtracking a little bit. This split up my family. Yeah. I'm still living in a house by myself with my cat and my dog, and my fiance and her 3 kids are living a few blocks away. This ripped apart my family. This caused me to be homeless for over 2 months. Some friends of mine gave me what became the Casa Camper. It's in my backyard right now. Yeah. I spent every last dime that I had on securing a place for my fiance and the kids. And I spent what I had left beyond that on paying for a campsite to park the camper. We then had some awesome people in the Instagram community band together. And in the States and in Canada, they started up a couple of GoFundMes. Yeah. Again, hate is very real. Those GoFundMes were reported as a scam. And so very good friends of ours, very good supporters of Casa Genetics were told, you shut this down or we're going to have you charged. So they refunded everybody in full. We never got a cent. These were people that had donated hundreds and hundreds of dollars to trying to help us get a down payment for a house. Strangers all across the world that cared about us, you know? Yeah. And because somebody had a problem with me personally, because I kicked them off the team, they took it to that level.
That's just cold, man. That is just so freaking cold. And you're doing everything right too. I mean, you're following the laws. You got your ACMPR. For those down in the south, that is the access to cannabis for medical purpose regulations. Yes. I also have my license. It enables us to grow more than the recreational legal limit of 4 plants. And it's just so frustrating because I mean, you go through and you take all the right steps to be legal, to do things properly, and still this sort of thing can happen. It's so disheartening, and it's frustrating because there's still so much stigma around cannabis in general. Joe, what do you think we can do to help remove that stigma, to help bring this plant forward and not so much in the shadows anymore?
The number one, or I guess 2 things simultaneously, I would say, is transparency and education. Totally. Honest education. I mean, ever since Reefer Madness, people have been on this stigma bandwagon, and people have to understand that all it takes is doing some real research and reading some real books to even just acknowledge that this plant is, for one, it's called cannabis. Marijuana that term was introduced back in the 30s at the time of Reefer Madness, and marijuana, as it's called, it's a sacred form of tobacco. It's used by Mexicans that has very crazy psychoactive effects. Nothing to do with the cannabis plant, So I think right starting there, we have to start with transparent, unbiased education. We have to rip the stigma apart. We have to call the plant what it is. It's cannabis. It's a plant medicine. It's been used for healing and sacrament and religious services for over 15,000 years. It does help with cancer. It does help with PTSD. It does help with ADHD, ADD, glaucoma. Like, there's books full of it, Yeah. So to me, I think that's paramount, is absolute, unbiased, transparent education. Because without it, we're going to keep chasing our tails, having this same conversation of, is it bad? Is it good? Is it good? Is it bad? I mean, I sat the other night and I broadcast an amazing documentary showcasing the true origins of cannabis from its beginning to now. I then went and watched a different documentary that PBS put out. No offense to PBS, because it was an older documentary, again, still during Prohibition times, and a very Americanized documentary. I watched it last night with my fiance, and you've got one doctor saying, yes, this is a fantastic medicine, and we need to back the research. We need to get the knowledge out. We need to do this. And you have another doctor who's saying, no, we need to push the pills. We need to push the THC pills. We don't need to smoke dope. And it's like, well, one, stop calling it dope. No one's called it dope since the friggin' 70s and the 80s. And for two, how can you have two medical practitioners on a different plane? You know, and that seems to be the trend even still. Yeah. We're in a time where we're realistically, in a lot of ways, probation is over, you know, and we're at the time where probation, if it's not, it needs to be over. There's far too much documented evidence showing the benefits and the profitability of cannabis. Cannabis can save lives. It can change lives. It can create jobs. It can benefit infrastructure. The possibilities and benefits are endless that this plant can provide. Right. So I think the focus needs to be on those benefits and not the lies and bullshit that was created back in the 30s. And for one, we're not in the 30s anymore, brother.
We're almost there again, but no, it's
right. Yeah. Like
it's science versus opinion, right? You know, and
absolutely. And like you just said it, we are almost in 2030. Yeah. Why are we still living like it's 1930? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, the truth is out there. Everybody knows it. Like, I love that I see more and more elders and seniors and nurses going into the dispensary than I do going into the pharmacy. Yeah. These are the times that we live in, right? So if we're seeing that locally day to day, we should be seeing that globally. And I think once we get to that point, you're going to see a global, like, we will see a shift globally in health, in mental health, in prosperity, in economy. I think it's going to change everything.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, cannabis heals, pharmaceuticals addict, right? And it's really down to the folks in the South there to take that off that Schedule 1 list. Yes. Because I mean, it doesn't even need to be federally legalized. It just needs to be legitimized as being proper medicine and not just some narcotic with no medicinal benefits. But I think we've kind of beat this into the ground a little bit. And I want to get back into the grow room and talk a little bit more about that sort of thing. And absolutely, your routine. Now, do you like to switch it up? Do you like to do different things each grow? Do you have a set path that you follow? And tell me, organic, synthetics, a mixture of both?
First off, organic, 100%. Nothing but organic. And with styles, I used to experiment quite a bit. I guess I still incorporate different techniques as I learn. I'm always learning and evolving with every grow. Every grow that I do is a different experience. But I'm very much, especially like right now, I've gone back to really where I started. I use the Ufo method to germinate. Rather than the wet paper towel in the baggie. I was doing that.
I'm familiar with the UFO method. Could you explain that?
So the UFO method, it's basically the same as everything else. You know, you still do your soak. You know, you put your seeds in water, you do your soak, and then you put your seeds onto warm wet paper towel. But rather than put more paper towel on top of that and then put those into a bag, you leave it. You put paper towel on a plate and you put your seeds on top of that. You then just cover the plate either with another plate upside down or a tray, whatever, and you just put it into a warm, dark place.
Okay.
And I found with that method, I have usually 98 to 100% success rate with germination with anything that I'm running.
Nice.
So that, of course, in comparison to just the regular bag method, which I was running consistently. I was using that method because someone that I was learning a lot from said, no, you're doing it wrong. Do it this way. And so I did it that way. And so sorry, to kind of get back on point, I'm back to my roots, kind of back to my basics. The first technique that I learned for germinating was that Ufo method. So I definitely stick to that. I don't really do anything crazy. I run LEDs. I've always run LEDs. I'm slowly phasing out my blurpos. A lot of people rip on me for running my blurpos, but I've had fantastic results with them. Other than they run really, really hot. So I'm trying to phase them out. But I don't really do anything crazy. I run organics. I run specifically Mario Super Soil products. Other than that, tap water. I'm never fussy about my pH. I let the plant do the talking. If the plant looks thirsty, I give it water. If the plant looks hungry, I'll feed it some Mario's products. I grow in a peat mixture. I don't grow in soil anymore. I'm trying to be a part of that soil less movement to help the whole topsoil crisis kind of thing.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm always evolving. I'm constantly watching other growers. A lot of the OGs. Try and read a lot of the books and just pick and choose different methods. And I try everything. I tell people I'll try anything twice. If it works, I'll go with it. If it doesn't work, I'll try and tweak it and I'll try it again. Otherwise, I'll scrap it. But other than that, I try and be very, very basic. I'm a very big believer in if the genetics that I'm producing are good enough, then the plant's just going to grow and it's going to perform. And the same therein with the genetics that I'm working with to breed with or growing for my own medicine. If what I have is what I'm paying for or what I'm being told, if it is what I'm being told it is when I'm giving it, I should just be able to water it and let it grow. You know what I mean? So I try and be as organic as possible, especially because I do grow for medicine. So I don't want any heavy metals or chemicals or any of that crap in there. So yeah, organics all the way.
Yeah, and just that keep it simple process, and that's really the way it should be. It's a plant, let it do its thing. If you've got the strong genetics, they're definitely going to take off. And that's one thing I do say to people is, environment is key. You got to get that environment dialed in. It has to be done first before you care about anything else. You got to have your environment perfect. And
absolutely.
Once that's done, genetics really do come into play and make that difference. But what do you think that most experienced growers still tend to underestimate?
Honestly, themselves. I think at the end of the day, you can have as basic as gear as you want or as top of the line gear as you want. Of course, high-end gear, it helps to a point. Certain things run cooler, certain things are more controllable. Controllers are a godsend. I don't have any controllers myself yet other than my little one from AC Infinity, and I've got a little monitor called a Mizu from Coconut. That's amazing. I can be anywhere in the world and monitor my stuff right on my phone. It's awesome. So there's, technology and gear provides peace of mind. But I think a lot of growers get wrapped up in that gear and they're like, I have to have the top Mars. I have to have the top Spider Farm. I have to have this. And they lose sight of their skills, and I think that's the biggest thing any grower can really focus on is just focus on your skills, focus on, just don't lose sight of, like if you have a talent, use your talent. And I don't know, not to rabbit trail on this one, but I think that's like the biggest thing that people really miss on, and it's something that I had to kind of wrap my head around, because a lot of people are always like, yo, like no one's doing it like you're doing it. I'm like, hey, I appreciate that, but what am I doing so differently? Other than I'm transparent, I'm honest, I'm very bare bones, very organic, and I don't rely on my gear. I trust my gear to a point, but if I trusted my gear completely, I wouldn't be spending most of my day in this room watching my plants. I'd be like, they're fine, and I'd go about my business. I'm in this room watching my plants like 80% of my day, because I trust my eyes more than my equipment. Yeah. I trust my instinct more. I can see how a tent is sagging and be like, oh, the moisture's off. I can see how a leaf is curving and be like, I need to feed it. That my gear doesn't tell me that. So I definitely think that's what growers definitely, they underestimate themselves and they overestimate their equipment.
It's so true. Like, I can't agree with you enough. And to just give an analogy to that, I enjoy smoking meat. I like pulled pork, I like the brisket, all that stuff. And it used to be that, I got to go and I got to get all these fancy toys and tools and like digital thermometers and wireless and all this stuff. And then I decided, I'm just going to take and push that stuff to the side and focus on the skill. And instantly, like, it was almost overnight, I got better at doing what I was doing. Because, like you say, I started having faith in my abilities, started using my senses more, touch, feel, smell, all that sort of thing. I mean, in the grow room, your eyes are so critical. I mean, to get in there every day, look at your plants, scoping. Because if you're not scoping, you could be running into bugs, and nobody wants to.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So that was my next question there, Joe. Let's talk a little bit about IPM. What do you do for IPM, and have you ever lost the battle?
I've lost a battle last round, actually. Yeah. So I guess backtrack. So my first instance having issues with pest was when I first began growing. I used to run Miracle-Gro soil.
Okay.
And it was cheap. It was everywhere that I went. So I was like, yeah, I'll just grow with this. And I actually had a really good success in the beginning. And then I transitioned to ProMix Herb and Veg, had even better results. And then I've never looked back. I run ProMix everything pretty much. So anyways, I ran out of the ProMix I was running, and I went to get some more. They were out, and I grabbed a batch of what the heck was it? Miracle-Gro again, the same stuff that I used to run. And after one watering, a very light watering, I had nothing but mites crawling all out of the soil. Oh. The entire bag was full of bugs, and that spread through my entire tent. All the plants got it, and I was chasing mites for months. That was terrible. I didn't know what to do with that. I ended up investing in a whole bunch of sticky traps, and I really backed off with my my watering to the point where they were bone dry at times and wilty, just so that the bugs would die off. And then I very lightly start to water, bring them back up a little bit. Treat the top with some diatomaceous earth that's huge. I had huge problems. And then I got lucky for, I guess, kind of my kind of interim round, and I got very lucky on the acreage, actually, because I was plagued with mites and spider mites at the acreage. But we had three different sites on the property that were breeding grounds for ladybugs. So I'd have the kids go and trap as many ladybugs as they could, and I'd be like, "Hey, go in the grow room, pick a plant, and set them free."
Nice.
And I never had problems again. So yeah. I was definitely very lucky. And knock on wood, so far, I don't have any issues in this house. I haven't had any spider issues or mite issues, but definitely, if anybody has had issues with mites, if you can get any any ladybugs, any diatomaceous earth, any trying to think of the word.
Beneficial insects.
Yes, I was trying to think of the other word for that, but yeah, any of those, like, absolutely. There's a bunch of really, really good providers that breed those specifically and breed them specifically for cannabis. So,
yep.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak too much out of that, just because I've been fairly lucky. I haven't had too many issues with my plants, other than heat and water has been my nemesis. So.
Yeah. Environmental conditions are always something, and can be very tricky to battle against. And different pieces of gear can cause you different types of grief. And have you ever had a piece of equipment that's really failed and let you down?
Yeah, I have. The biggest failure I had was with one of my humidifiers. Actually, I had a really nice setting going in my 4x4, and overnight, there's two things actually. My heater died overnight, and because the heater died, the humidifier spiked.
Right.
And because it spiked, it tripped itself. And when I checked on the plants in the morning, it was like a monsoon. The tent was sopping wet, as if a sprinkler had gone off in there. And I don't know how I didn't lose the plant. I cried. I'd never seen anything like it. And yeah. I remember showing a video to the team, and I was like, I don't know what to do, you guys. I'm like, oh my God. And I cranked up I got a great big dehumidifier. I cranked that up. I ran that. I was dumping bucket after bucket out. And I brought it back. And that was actually on a chocolate chunk indica grow. Beautiful, beautiful grow. I was so happy with it. And I was just, I just lost it. But that was my worst failure with equipment. My biggest mishap, I guess, was I had a beautiful tangerine dream grow. Tangy is my favorite strain to grow. And I had a really nice grow going. It was sitting on top of a table, and the light over top, for whatever reason, it actually fell down, and it swooped down and literally snapped like half the top right off. And that would have been fixable, but it also knocked the whole friggin' thing on the floor, and just, yeah. So
always a challenge.
There's always something, but I mean, maintaining the environment is my biggest struggle. Like recently, this room specifically has been crazy. This is a very old house. This house was built back in like the 1940s. Mm-hmm. There's no actual foundation per se. Like it's very much right on the ground. There's like that old school like sub crawl space just to run the ducting kind of thing. And so it gets very, very hot. And even though I have the ducting specifically blocked off in this room, so I'm not overheating the plants, this room will sit about 33 degrees. Ooh. While the rest of the house is sitting about 20, which then with all the lights running, the interior of the tents will sit, if the tents are closed, at 48 degrees.
48?
Yeah. So that's been my biggest struggle since, it's been insane. I don't know how the plants have been growing. Specifically, like I'm growing Granddaddy Purple and grilled cheese for my Mad Munchin project that's coming out soon.
Yep.
And I don't know how they survived. Those two have been growing in this room at 38 degrees. And like the RH was sitting at like 30. It was just pathetic, just brutal conditions. Yeah. And they've been thriving in it. Now I've got it sitting beautifully. It's like 28 and 70. It's just gravy. And they're just, they're praying up to the light. They're just awesome. But yeah, environment is always my nemesis, always. And again, that goes back to my point of not relying on the gear, because I was relying on, yeah, I got the AC Infinity Cloud line. It's the end all be all, which it's a killer unit. I rely heavily on it. I do rely heavily on my monitor, but I really had to go back and be like, okay, what was I doing before that I'm not doing now? Because I had the perfect setup before, and I had my inline fan set up different. I set my ducting up how I had it before. Now I have no issues. The plants are happier. So it's always environment is a fight for me.
Oh,
Never
for
ending
sure.
battle, man.
For sure. And just,
Yeah.
for our American friends, of course, we're talking in Canadian temperature, not freedom units. So, I mean, it's like we're dealing with like high 80s to mid 90s and stuff. And the plants generally aren't really
Oh
like that
yeah.
without some form of CO2 injection. But it sounds like you're still managing to keep things on point. Now, talking about struggles, of course, what do you feel your biggest struggle as a breeder has been, Joe?
Um, my biggest struggle as a breeder, um, again, not to be repetitive, but honestly would be myself.
Yeah.
Because I mean, right now I don't, or at any given time, I'm probably sitting with access to 30 different strains that I can play with, but my biggest struggle is always myself, because I deal with PTSD. I deal with depression on such a prevalent basis that most days growing is the only thing that keeps me going, and growing and my family, like that's my only constant.
Yeah.
And so because I put so much into my grows, when something goes wrong, I get really devastated. And so for me, not giving up and just being like, you know what, it's all part of the game. Like if a seed goes to mold, it's a weak genetic. Maybe it wasn't pollinated properly. Maybe, maybe I overwatered. There's so many different variables. And so my biggest struggle, honestly, in breeding has been not taking those hurdles personally, because they're variables, right? They're gonna happen. It is specifically in breeding. I mean, you're literally crossing things that weren't meant to go together. So things can go crazy. You can end up with herm seeds. You can end up with poor pollination. You can have environmental issues. You can have stress issues. You can have overwatering, underwatering, high RH, low RH, pH issues, you name it. You can have genetic issues. Are they weak? Are they, are they mid, as I call them, where they'll germ really well, but they'll sprout weak, or they'll break soil strong, but as they start to sprout, they kind of shrivel up and then they're done, So there's always those things. And like even recently, I'm growing multiple grows as part of a competition that I entered, and I had 16 grows, and they were doing beautifully. Overnight, again, environment is always my nemesis. Overnight, I lost 9 plants.
Wow.
I came back into this room in the morning. The plants were completely, dehydrated soil, shriveled up plants, and I dropped to my knees. I'm like, what did I do? I went to bed. They were good. I did a light watering, but I saved 7. I lost 9. I started 18 more, so it's not a big deal, but again, not beating myself up and being like, because that's what I did. I'm like, oh, I messed up. I screwed up. I did something, and now I'm out. And then I look closer and I'm like, you know what? 1, 2, I started counting them. I'm like, I can save 7. I'm not out of the competition yet. So I got rid of 9. And then I sat down later to sort seeds for some collaborators. And I'm like, I still have more of these entries. I can pop more entries. I'm back in it. Not a big deal. So yeah, absolutely. My biggest hurdle is always this. It's always me.
Yeah. And, there's always going to be a challenge in the growth space. There's always going to be something going on, be it past environmental pressures, something that you didn't consider. And when you start
Oh, absolutely.
internal,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you start to internalize those issues as opposed to accept them as a challenge and a learning opportunity, it's tough to move on as a grower. I mean, I know that like on the Discord that I run, we've got growers on there that are new, and they'll run into an issue and they really start to stress on it. And it's just, guys, don't stress. It's a plant. You know, we'll get it back. We can recover, and it's just trying to help these new guys out. So that's gonna bring me to my next question. If somebody came to you, Joe, as a new breeder, saying that they wanted to get started, what would be that key piece of advice that you'd give them?
First off, whatever you're looking to start with, buy your genetics from a reliable source. Mm-hmm. Even if you're one of those people that is even if you're in my own Instagram community, buy from a reliable source. I'm not saying even buy from me, you know, but make sure you know who you're buying from, because there's genetics coming out every 30 seconds. And like, I'm not even kidding. The genetics game is unreal right now. And there is, I mean, if you want to get it as a new beginner, you want to get into growing, now is the time. You can make money in it right now. You can you can easily have access to genetics all around the globe right now. But starting out, make sure you absolutely buy from a reputable source, so you're actually going to get bang for your buck and not be disappointed, because there's nothing worse in wanting to grow and, you know, really, really getting into it. And then you germinate and, you know, your seed doesn't pop. And then you're like, oh, like that's the worst feeling ever. Right. So make sure you start off with a strong genetic. Don't go for the top of the line gear right off the hop. You don't need the Mars Hydro. You don't need the Gorilla tent. You can rock a Vival Sun tent. You can rock a Burple Flyzen to save money. You can rock whatever the heck you want. You can rock gear from Walmart. I have some I'm running right now. I'm running Amazon gear. I'm running Walmart gear. I'm running home hardware gear. I'm running all kinds of stuff. I buy whatever I can afford and I make it work. That would be tip number 2. Buy what you can afford and make it work. Don't go all brand crazy. You know, you'll get there if you're getting into it, especially if you're getting into it to be on social media, you'll get there. Somebody will recognize what you're doing. If you're doing it in the right way on social media, you'll get the recognition organically. Somebody will be like, hey, I see you're using one of my lights. Well, let's talk about it. How do you like it? You know, they might throw you a light, you know. Yeah. Sometimes that happens. I was talking to somebody about Bloom Plus lights, beautiful lights that are out now. And somebody heard me talking about it, and because we're actually looking into a possible either a partnership or a sponsorship with them, whatever. And somebody was just like, hey, you know what? I heard you talking about these lights. I have one. I want to give it to you, and then you can check it out. And if you like it, reach out to Bloom Plus and tell them you love it. So sometimes that's all it takes, you know. And so yeah, just use what you can get, use what you can afford, and don't give up.
Yeah.
Always have, and number 1 is always have fun with it. If it ever starts to feel like a chore or like you're doing a job, slow it down or even walk away from it for a bit and then come back to it. It's just like anything else. Because this breeding, it's a hobby, but it's also a science. You can easily overload yourself with content, with knowledge. You can also spend the rest of your life learning. And if you're willing to be a sponge for this, there's my other advice. Be a sponge for this and your opportunities will be endless. As far as you want to go, that's as far as this can take you. 100%.
Yeah, the hard work that you're willing to put into it is the hard work that will be rewarded. Because at the end of the day, this is not a difficult plant to grow. To do it consistently and repeatedly, that's a different story. But hey, you know, yes. Practice.
Absolutely. Practice is key.
Yeah. So, Joe, I'd like to know about your favorite grow. Tell me about when everything just came together and you had those, you know, baseball bat sized colas of the stanky danky.
That would be the chocolate chunk indica that I grew, hands down. That one, no, better than that one would have been the Gorilla Glue number 4 that I ended up crossing with a version of the new that was crossed with Peanut Butter Breath. So that became my cross that I called Lifted Monkey. But the GG4 that became the mother for that project was such a beautiful genetic. I did nothing to it. I germinated it. I planted it. It grew symmetrical. It grew perfect. It grew bushy and full and tall. The buds were thick and resinous and like literal, like gorilla fingers, like it was supposed to. It was just a beautiful, beautiful plant. And absolutely my favorite to grow so far.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it was just like very low maintenance. It was for my style of growing, it was perfect. The plant literally grew itself more or less.
Yeah. So touching off something that you mentioned there, peanut butter breath. I've actually got some peanut butter crosses, and I'm currently growing out like some banana buttercup stuff. Very much what I would consider hype strains. Now, as a breeder and somebody who's producing your own beans, what are your thoughts on some of these exorbitantly expensive, strains, and are they really worth that level of money?
So far, in my experience with what I purchased and what I've grown, I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
That's just my own personal experience, though, because I know I spent $180 for 2 packs from a certain genetic producer, only to find out that one of the strains that I very eagerly paid for, he didn't even have. And it was kind of one of those things. So there's a lot of that. I mean, at the same time, I have no problem jumping on those $1,000 boxes that give you one of a kind genetics, because usually those $1,000 boxes, they're worth like $1,800 and they're packed with so much stuff. They're usually worth it. The ones that are at that caliber, I feel they're likely worth it, but other ones I just don't buy it. With peanut butter breath, it's gonna sound weird coming from me because my last 4 crosses had peanut butter breath in them, but I'm not a big fan of peanut butter breath, to be honest. I was very fortunate. I mean, I've been able to smoke it. I enjoyed the smoke. It's just not in my top personally, but I was able to work with the genetic that it was already in, and it's a hell of a genetic. But I don't know. I mean, there's all these other stuff. I know lots of people now. They're growing that foxtail stuff, and lots of people are still growing freak show. I haven't had a chance to work with some of that. I'm supposed to. I think a friend of mine is going to be sending me some freak to work with. My teammate and we might be jumping on the ducktail wagon just to get the experience. But I don't know really if there should be any of the hype that there is behind any of these genetics. I mean, really, unless it's something that is such a potent CBD, CBG that it is legitimately destroying chronic pain, or is, like, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm not that easily impressed, but I mean, I know there was a certain strain, I won't name it, but there was a certain strain that was released recently that my uncle, who actually today will be taking his last breath because of assisted suicide. He's dying of stage 4 cancer right now.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
He was using this strain, and it was so potent that he has no pain.
Yeah.
while he's using that strain. So, I mean, stuff like that, when that comes out, that stuff should be getting the hype. But that strain, you never heard about it, and you never will.
Well, I
You know,
think the big issue too is it's so much in we're spending these very high dollar values in getting stuff that isn't a stable strain. I personally have got some in-house stuff, and well, it gave me 4 good plants. I mean, there was
yeah.
really one that was what I expected, and when it's that level, it's I think we should be looking at like F4, F5s at least, having that level
Oh,
of
yeah.
stability, not just I crossed these 2 plants together. One was peanut butter breath, and the other was this. Give me $500, right?
Oh, exactly. Exactly. You know, and there's a lot of that coming out, specifically. I mean, granted, because I do have a lot of stuff that I'm able, that's gifted to me that I'm able to work with. Granted, there are some people that they've given me F1s that blow my mind.
Oh,
F1s,
totally.
but there's I don't know. I completely agree with what you're saying. I feel if you're going to charge, dispensary level prices for your genetics, the quality should match the price tag. That's all I'm saying. I mean, when I go into my local dispensary that does sell seeds, it's $65 for a pack of 4 regs. But I know they're good regs because I know the company in Edmonton, and I stand behind that company. So it's I don't know. I think it's I again, I just echo that point. The quality should match the price. If it doesn't, then you're just making money. You're not helping people. And I don't know. I guess there's also kind of an underlying to that too. I mean, some people are very confident in what they have and they put it out, and they think they're up here with their stuff, and they put it out priced at this tier of product, when performance wise it's down here at like the $50 mark, and it's really performing at like the $10 mark. That's where I think there needs to be a conversation specifically like what we're having, right? Because there's a lot of people making money off of good, innocent people that just want to grow solid strains out for various reasons. And they're spending a lot of good money and they're buying garbage, So I think that's where there needs to be a whole different conversation, and there needs to be some way around that, where I think anybody breeding should be able to make some money off their genetics, because if you're breeding, I feel like unless you're only breeding for self, friends, and family, you probably want to get yourself on the market at some point. So, get yourself out there, get yourself exposed, start your own brand, all the power to you. But make sure what you're putting out when you're ready to put it out is backed up, and that way you don't have to worry about the fallout. You can stand there like some people can and be like, yeah, it is what it is. It is what I say it is. And not just because I say it is, because this person's growing it, this person's growing it, this person's growing it. It's, I don't know. It goes back to transparency and honesty, right?
Yeah, well, 100%, 100%. And that's the thing is, if you're going to get in the game to make money, my personal thought is you're going about it and you're doing the wrong thing, because this plant, it should be there to help people, and that's what we should be doing, is helping people. And ultimately, that's what I'm all about. I mean, that's why I do this. I got a sponsor and I make a few bucks, I get a couple pieces of gear, but whatever, I just want to grow. I want to help others grow. And Joe, I guess, as we're getting close to the end here, what do you feel that we can do more of to just help out the new grower?
Honestly, content like this, man, content like what you're putting out, content like I'm trying to put out now, through my different avenues, just honest content like this. I don't, there's thousands and thousands of YouTube channels about breeding and growing, which is fine. I love it. There's not enough podcasts talking about real talk like this. There's not enough YouTube channels talking like we're talking right now. And I think this needs to happen. I think the platforms like what you have, content like what you're putting out, platforms like what I'm trying to build, I think this is kind of the route that needs to be taken, because this gives so many people of all different demographics access to honest, for the most part, and hopefully unbiased, opinions, and just access to honest, free information and education, and because for the most part, exactly like you said, you're in this just for the love of doing this. And yeah, you have a sponsor, and hey, I just got my first sponsor too, and I love it. I respect it, but everything I do is out of pocket, and it's out of my mind and my heart. If we can have more people like-minded to us doing this on other platforms, YouTube, Buddy Jane, Zoom, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, TikTok, because TikTok is such a world of trash right now. If we can get some solid content on there like this, to not have people twerking and doing stupid shit, but actually talking about some truth.
Yeah, man.
I think we can convey to a lot more audiences and really at least get the message across to enough people that will listen to it. And I mean, I'm a firm believer in each one reach one. You know what I mean? So, I mean, your content reached me through our buddy Tim. Yeah. And my content reached you through our buddy Tim. And, your content is going to reach, thank you, Timothy's Crab Shack. What up, Tim? All it takes is sitting and having a conversation and being real and honest, and it just flows from there. So I think that's the biggest thing, is keeping stuff like this organic and keeping it going like this. I think it's just going to, I don't know. I think content like this is going to have a lot of power to it, is really my whole point behind that. I really think there's a lot of strength through using social media like this for what it was meant to, to teach, to educate, to reach people. Not just, I mean, if you want to dance, go ahead and dance. If you want to party, go on with your bad self, do what you want to do. But for what we're trying to do to reach people that we want to reach, I think we need to keep doing this exact thing right here. Yeah. Just having the talks. If it gets heavy, let it get heavy. If it gets emotional, let the emotion flow. If it gets heated, let the hot seat get hot, and not be afraid to push those hot buttons. Like, that's why I'm going to be launching all different topics to reach all different people. And I know we'll probably be doing more of this in the future. Like, I love what you're working on, and yeah, not to be a broken record, but yeah, this has to continue, man, because there's not enough people talking. Everybody's hiding behind an image, or hiding behind a brand, or hiding behind looking flashy. Meanwhile, we're all struggling. We're all hurting in some way, and we're all very real people. This plant can heal in so many ways. So why not talk about it so the rest of the world can find healing? You don't have to smoke it. You can put it in a tea. You don't have to drink it. You can put it in a pill. You don't have to take it in a pill. You can take it in a gummy, a chocolate, a sucker, you name it. You can cook it in your favorite meal, like you name it. You can take it in any way, shape, or form that you want. You don't have to rip a bong. You don't have to smash a dab. You don't have to smoke a doobie. You can do whatever you want with it and still find healing. It's that powerful. So why aren't more people talking about it like you and I,
Exactly. And if people want to find you online to talk about it, Joe, tell me about all your social media stuff. And we will link it below too.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you can find Casa Genetics on casagenetics.com. You can find us at Casa Genetics on Facebook. We're at Casa Genetics on Buddy Jane. We're at Casa Genetics on YouTube. We're just launching on YouTube. There's not much on there, but we're there. And at Casa Genetics Canada on Instagram. We're basically on Instagram. That's where you'll find us primarily. And yeah, definitely got lots more on the way. lots more coming in the new year. And yeah, I'm getting giddy for what's coming in the new year. Hopefully more content like this. And
Sure.
I can't thank you for this opportunity enough. This has been a treat.
Oh, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today, Joe. I mean, you said a whole bunch of stuff that I totally agree with, and it's great, talking with a like-minded individual such as yourself. And as I wrap up the show here today, there's that one question that I really like to ask everybody. And what do you think the next big thing will be for cannabis?
The next big thing for cannabis. I think that's a good question. Because, originally, if you had asked that question even a couple months ago, I would have said the next move would have been an advance in like terpene content in legal products. And we're already there. Terpenes are on a huge rise.
Yes.
One thing I've noticed that's coming out, though, that I think is going to be the next thing is I think you're going to see cannabis become more of an at-home product. I'm definitely seeing more of a trend toward topicals, toward, things like bath bombs, things like even cannabis soaps. I think you're going to see cannabis become more of an at-home thing, an in-house topic, an at-home name, just for so many reasons, whether it's cooking, fashion, medicine, all that. It just seems to be evolving in that way. I mean, there's cannabis clothing brands coming out now. There's cannabis drinks. There's cannabis specific music, that's out now. There's cannabis specific TV that's coming out. Like, I think that's all going to be part of it. And if nothing else, you're going to see so much more education and so much more opportunities coming because of that education.
100%. Yeah, for sure. And I think we'll finally achieve parity when we start seeing Disney branded cannabis stuff. Some R2D2 bongs or something.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That would be great. All right, guys. Well, hey, Joe, owner of Casa Genetics, dude, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you today. Really enjoyed our discussion here, and hopefully we can do more of this as we get into the end of the year, 2022. All sorts of big things happening, guys. Go check him out. And Joe.
Oh, thank you so much.
Appreciate you, brother.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. And we'll look forward to hopefully more of this in the future. Take care, man.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Yeah.